All right, as promised, we talked about, or at least I did. Doug Norrie doesn't necessarily want to get into trade speculations, but everybody knows that I do. It's why we have Haze from the Locked On Bulls podcast in here to maybe break down an interesting perspective. Thanks for making a few minutes for us.
Anytime, anytime. Thanks for having me.
You got it. And quickly though, you somewhat recently took over Locked On Bulls, correct?
Yeah, it took over Locked On Bulls in March. Yeah,
There
March
you go.
10th, I think, was my first episode.
And now turn around. March feels like a distant memory, right? Like when you
Yeah,
start doing the 5 days a week and covering, it's like don't even remember what day it was, but it's happening, and now we're in the middle of it.
for sure, for sure.
We had this discussion about how the Nets can maybe improve themselves this offseason, and we started looking around the league when you talk about the potential of, well, is Kyrie coming back on the player option? Are they going to extend them? At a certain point, it feels like you have to assume that's the case because is Kyrie going to be available if you were going to trade him?
Mm.
Is he more valuable anywhere else other than in Brooklyn? So when we go to the second tier, though, Chicago came up on my radar because first and foremost, I'm interested to know how concerned should Bulls fans be around Zach Lavine and being committed to testing free agency, seeing what the market looks like. Is there a confidence level that he's coming back? It's just a matter of him getting that free agent experience, or is there a real world scenario where the Bulls move forward without him?
I think, I mean, it's definitely possible that it doesn't return, but I think the good money and the highest chances are that he does come back. When you look at us being able to offer him the most money, going to being on the team that was really built for him to succeed. I know there's some people to try to sensationalize some things going on between him and DeMar DeRozan, but I just think everything being even, it's better chance of him coming back to the Bulls than not. I think, in my opinion.
Okay, so then beyond, so we assume that he's there, and we assume it's Ball and it's DeRozan. When you
Mm,
look at this team, because I was curious around a couple of players that we talk about on our side of it is, well, there's a young talent like a Cam Thomas that maybe has value on the market. Probably
mm,
less likely for a Chicago Bulls if you're going to bring Levine back. You have a lot of guard play there available for you already. But then the other guy we talk about on the net side of it is Joe Harris because he has a big cap number and they were
mm.
able to get Seth Curry in the trade with the 76ers for James Harden. Is firepower around these guards something that Chicago is looking to bring in?
I definitely think so. I think if you look at the fact of they really tried their best to get Coby White going, and Coby had a great January and February, probably the best 2 months of his career, but it wasn't consistent. And I definitely think they're going to be looking in to bring in two-way players, another player off the bench who can also score, and also a defensive big off the bench as well. But I think if they do those things, the Bulls will be in a really great position. Now that is a lot. It sounds easy to just state, "Hey, do these three things, and then we'll be better." But AK and Eversley have brought in a bunch of trust, right? They've brought in. They've completely washed away everything from the previous front office. So I think that we have a lot of faith in AK and Eversley to do what needs to be done.
So then from that standpoint, because that's what I thought was interesting. Coby White has had an evolution over a very short amount of time as far as a Chicago Bulls player went
Mm-hmm.
from maybe being one of those pieces to the injury, and then all of a sudden Ball comes in and DeRozan comes in, and you end up being a lot further down the pecking order. He was an interesting name to me. I don't know, from my standpoint, you look at him, it's on the 7 point, I think it's going to be the team option for 7.4 million. You would expect an extension maybe to be there. That falls underneath the trade exemption that the Nets have available for them. So obviously they could make that work
Mm-hmm.
in a scenario where Joe Harris, obviously one of the best 3 point shooters, we know he's coming off an injury as well, but it feels like worth the risk there for Chicago if you're looking to take the next step in the playoffs.
Yeah.
What would a package look like? If it's Joe Harris, can the Nets say, yeah, we want back Coby White because there's some upside there at the point guard position? I looked inside of the roster and thought, well, Jevonte Green is someone that's been shuffled around a little bit, only one
Mm-hmm.
year left on him as well. Probably would ask for him, and then would probably say I'd like some capital as well inside of the draft. How far do you think a Chicago would be willing to go to acquire someone like Harris?
I,
Understanding too, by the way, there is $18 million attached to his name as well.
Yeah, I think that the money would possibly keep that from happening. I think when you look
Mhm.
at having to give up a Javante who played amazing for the Bulls, played power forward at 6'4" for the Bulls, being able to move him to the bench and have him play backup three, I think is going to unlock a little bit of his game. So I don't know if you have to give up draft capital, Coby White and Javante, that price may be too high for Joe Harrison. What keep in mind, AK and Eversley have given up so many first round picks. We don't have it. We basically every other year until 2027, we have a first round pick every other year because of what we had to give up. Wendell Carter, the DeMar DeRozan trades, thing like that. So I don't know. But again, AK and Eversley get so creative with the cap. When you look at how we've brought in the players that we've brought in, it was all signing trades basically. So I won't say that it's not a possibility. I just think, looking at all things even, that may be too high of a calling card in my opinion. So
Coby White and just capital, would that be more viable if you're looking to keep Green in there? Or because as you say, it's funny. I mean, the Nets they have a pick in 2067 as far as we can tell. But when you look at the Bulls, you don't notice. I mean, they have draft picks, but to
yeah,
your point, it's they have this year's coming up. They have Portland's in 2023. They have first round picks, and then I guess they have the gap there in 2025. So
yeah.
there's some level of flexibility there. But that number for Joe Harris too, does that deter them from looking at him and then saying, well, on the open market, we can spend money maybe to create even more depth and also firepower at a much more favorable number?
Definitely. I think that cap, like, Joe Harris is a really good player. Like, don't get me wrong, Joe Harris is a heck of a player, and I would love to have a Joe Harris off the bench. But yeah, that $18 million next season, $19 million the following season, when you look at already extending Zach Lavine, because we're having this conversation under the framework that Zach Lavine does resign here, and the Bulls have not paid the luxury tax all but one season since the luxury tax was a thing. I don't know if they commit that type of money, but hey, this is a new front office. Maybe they do.
Beyond that, then, this is what we said. We always want to try to flesh a couple of these things out because I think we just had a discussion, Doug and I, around the NBA Finals and kind of realizing in these two versions, it's a different version of the Golden State Warriors. It's
Mhm.
a team that maybe lacks a pure point guard in the Boston Celtics. There is suddenly more ways to win, it looks like. In the last
Yeah.
couple of seasons, this shift has come on where I think teams look at it and say, this isn't one dimensional. You're not building to beat the Golden State Warriors of 3-4 years ago and all their firepower or whatever team LeBron is on.
Mhm.
Where does Chicago stack up right now? They bring back Lavine, they have Ball, they have DeRozan. Do they feel like they're on that cusp of being in the top 3, seed of the Eastern Conference conversation, or do they feel compelled to take a bigger swing at some point because they're only 1 year into this new version of this
Yeah.
team? But how long can you go understanding the age of DeRozan and maybe wondering, when is the perfect niche of hitting his peak? Zach Lavine being fully invested, Ball on the rise. It feels like there's a few elements for Chicago that either it all goes right, and maybe Vucevic is a part of that too, or we're only 2 years away from saying, and how do we shuffle the deck here a little bit?
Well, I think that the Bulls shuffling the deck in a couple of years is fairly easy because you got Vooch coming off, you have DeMar coming off at that point. You had already decided if you're going to extend Coby White or not. The Bulls really, I think they're long term. I think we've now thought or worked ourselves into thinking like this window is only how long DeMar's here, and I don't agree with that. I think that you hope at least that Patrick Williams makes a leap between now and DeMar DeRozan's contract's up, and then that really truly opens your window because Lonzo's going to be here. How does Io develop, things like that? But I think that this Bulls team is not. Let me be clear: they're a playoff team, but they're
Mm.
not close. When you look at just the bench scoring, and I think that's what they're going to mainly try to address this offseason, and then see how it looks, and then maybe make a move with the deadline with Vucevic's expiring contract or something like that. But I think they're really going to try to improve the bench. The Bulls bench fluctuated between 26th and 29th in bench scoring. There's never been a team that's made any significant run with bench scoring ranked that low. Believe me, I've checked. I checked through 20 years of stats for that. It just hasn't happened. So they do have to address the bench productivity because I think the starting lineup, while it does have some glaring issues that they need to fix, but some of that can be offset with bringing in the correct bench players. And then maybe they take a look, and then by halfway through the season, if they're still not close enough to where they think they can go on a significant run, maybe they do look at saying, hey, Vooch is a $22 million expiring contract. How can we take advantage of that? So,
Yep, it's the more teams that we talk to, or the more teams that we look at from a Nets perspective. Listen, we have the high level talent. It's about getting them on the court, but flexibility, right? Being
yeah.
able to over a year or two evolve, and at the trade deadline look to maximize value for quality players that you know another team can utilize. The Nets haven't been in that position in a little while, which is why you start fishing around, trying to see if you can convince another team that maybe the highest value lies on the Nets roster and trying to rebuild not only now in this moment, but also then going forward with replenishing some draft capital as well.
True.
Listen, this is what we wanted to do. There's a much deeper, longer conversation just around the NBA in general that I'd love to be having with Haze, and we intend to do so down the line over the course of this offseason. But we throw out a trade opportunity. We get, I'm going to say it, we got rejected. It didn't work out for us. We're on the books for our money. We have to see if we can find another way to get it done. But Hayes, appreciate the time. Congratulations on taking over the Locked On Bulls podcast. And of course, if you're not checking them out already, get them on the feed. You can hear it here. Great content. Obviously, Quality Perspective knows what's going on inside of Chicago. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much.